Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of Jawin with Jack. I'm the Jack you're looking for. And this week, our special guest is Aaron of Tiny D10. He is an independent RPG designer and content creator with his own website and an entire game system, the namesake of his Twitter handle here, an entire game system released under the Creative Commons. Aaron, how you doing, man? Nice to have you here.
I'm doing well, Jack. Thanks for having me on.
Now, the place I always start with everybody, I just love this question. How did you get started in the RPG hobby? What was your first game and experience like?
Yeah. So I got started, pretty late compared to, a lot of our friends. It wasn't until I was in tech school back in 2010, around that time. So I was, 20, 21, that I actually got into playing D&D. I had some friends in tech school who were into it. It was something that I was always kind of interested in, but, never really had somebody to run me through it. So we started on 4th edition and just had a blast. So picked it up, like I said, at 4th edition in tech school and kind of, quickly got into some of the background of D&D and ended up kind of settling around BX. I found that system really suitable to, my style of play, which is, kind of open-ended sandbox sort of style. And, just kind of went from there, played BX for a number of years until, my kids were old enough to kind of start grasping the concept of tabletop RPGs. And they started showing interest right around, 4 or 5. And that's kind of where Tiny D10 had its inception is, let me see if I can boil some of these concepts down to, that level of a 4 or 5-year-old, just adding a little bit of a framework to, the imaginative play that they're already kind of, disposed to.
Right.
And we kind of took off from there.
It's the right age, I got to say, because I was about 5 when I started. So,
awesome.
Yeah, it was magic stuff. So I'm so happy to hear that. Like my dad, there's dads out there teaching their kids to play at a young age.
For sure. Well, and like I said, that's when their imagination is really starting to take off. And if you put just a little bit of rules around it, some constraints that, kind of force them to think creatively, I think it yields an even, better experience.
Exactly. For me, I remember being entranced by the idea of it's like Monopoly, but instead at the end of the game when all the pieces go in there, we like keep track of what everybody had and we pick up and just keep going the next time. I thought that was the, concepts and continuity were mind-blowing to me at that age.
Totally.
Now, Tiny D10 got birthed by interacting with your children and providing a simple enough framework for them to play. I love the fact that you didn't go with the D6 simply because I respect the D6, but it's too normal. There's something about the policy of the D10.
Yeah.
Is the probability distribution is a little bit more intuitive for me since it's
exactly. Yeah. It's base 10, and that's how we learn math right from the very beginning. So that really was kind of my rationale there is, not only is it kind of a number set that, kids are familiar with, when they learn to count 1 to 10. It's also it kind of preserves that uniqueness that, really that tabletop RPG feel, where like you said, D6, it's a great die. But that D10 just kind of, really kind of, like I said, kind of holds on to that core concept that this is different from, other traditional dice games.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, are there other games in your purview outside of the fantasy? Are there other interests that you're delving into? Cyberpunk, sci-fi, horror genres? Are there any things like that? Because it seems to me that with the resources at hand, Tiny D10 is finely tuned for fantasy. And it is a universal system, as you point out. It's very easily transportable into another genre. Have people taken on the mantle of providing resources for horror or sci-fi, or is there room for contributors to expand on that even?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So many years ago, the system kind of got settled around the core rule set that exists today. Hey, Hunter.
Cyrus. Glad to have you guys.
Hey, all right. So it kind of got settled, around the 10-page core rule set. I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Prior to that, just kind of like a quick timeline here. Initially, it was just like a 1-page rule set. That's just kind of how I laid it out with my kids. Those were the only rules that we needed during that age range. And then as it kind of went on, as the kids, their kind of taste for complexity increased, I tacked a few more rules onto it. It kind of was a ground up sort of thing, always modular, so we could always just kind of drop new rules in as the need arose. So like I said, about 6 or 7 years ago is when it hit 10 pages. Obviously the synchronicity there, was, I think, perfect, and it'll never get another page to the core rule set. I've got a handful of supplements out there that, just add, some kind of optional rules and support for different styles of play. But yeah, so right around that time where, like I said, I hit that 10-page core, there were a handful of people who contributed different settings and some supplements there, which I thought were really neat. One was Lovecraftian, obviously awesome.
Yes.
One was sci-fi flavored. Oh, truly hard to go wrong. Yeah. Outside of as far as tabletop games, we mostly play TD10 at home here. But we've also, obviously, I picked up a lot of really cool games from our friends here. So we take a stab at those when we get the chance. But Call of Cthulhu is another one that we had a lot of fun with, just because we're big Lovecraft fans here. So I've read a lot of Lovecraft stories. Yeah. It's so good. So read a lot of Lovecraft stories to the kids. So we played many games of Call of Cthulhu, and got a lot of fun out of that there. But yeah, obviously. With it being a Creative Commons system, it's totally wide open for contributions, and I love to see those. Next to people playing and enjoying the game, that's my favorite thing to see is when people want to create a custom class or a custom race or add a whole new setting. It's really neat to see. I love the contributions.
That's fantastic. Now, where do you hope to take this in the future? Are there particular places you'd like to stake out? Where do you think the needs of developing like a thriving ecosystem for Tiny D10 lie? How do you go about doing that? There's so many good indie examples, like Basic Fantasy being the other one. That's much more a direct clone of the BX system that we all love, but they really have carved out a loyal community, and there's a lot of resources out there to boot for it. So what are the things that need to happen for a game like that to gel, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's something that I think about a lot. And then I'm constantly reminded when I think about that there's this whole other element to, the games that we play and love. That I don't really understand, because at the end of the day, like, I'm just a hobbyist. I don't consider myself a game designer. I do this for fun. I do it because I love the game, and I do it because I want to share, fun things with people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, how to really, grow it, like you said, kind of like an ecosystem with, a fan base and people who contribute things. I don't know. I think my plan is to just kind of like hang out on Twitter and, support my friends and, just try to do fun stuff. As far as where I personally want to take the system in the future, obviously there's the Island of the Eight Men setting that I've been kind of kicking around for a couple of years now, but I've really only put it to paper over the past few months. And, I've got, my game group is just there. It's my kids and my wife, so I've got,
Right.
3 older boys who are old enough to play, plus my wife. And then, one of my younger sons, he's kind of he just hit 4. He's getting to that age, where, he's ready to get involved. So we kind of, monkey around on the Island of the Eight Men. We did a little bit of a
monkey around on the Island of the Eight Men. Where's the pun king? I summoned the pun Force X.
But yeah, so right now we're just kind of running around. It's a very open sandbox sort of style. I've been following the Braunstein conversations. I think that's really cool, especially
yeah, me too.
How they bridge the sessions with downtime, and being that I live with my my game group, downtime we get a ton of mileage out of downtime play. So like I said, we're just kind of we did a little mini Braunstein where we played some of the factions against each other. Running down the MacGuffin, the meteorite that fell from the heavens, and it's animated the river pirates and the the crystal powered androids and the 8 Men tribes and all that stuff. So right now, what I really want to do is kind of lean more into that setting. I'm in my garage right now, as you can see, and it's kind of like a game and art studio for the whole family. We come out here to draw, to play games. We got a nice little kind of countertop set up, and it's just where we come to have fun. So I've got some wall space in here, and kind of following in what John McGowan is doing right now. I want to print out like a really big hex map. He's doing all the hard stuff so that we can, learn from him. And I want to just kind of
following his footsteps.
Exactly.
Yeah,
he's been paving the way for a very long time now. And recently, gosh, probably 3 or 4 months ago, I bought the Living Campaign, and I've read it like 5 times at this point. It's absolutely amazing, and it's actually out here on my game shelf.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so I want to kind of try that out, see how that can help us to support this kind of continuous model of play, where when we're not in sessions, we're running downtime activities, we're moving across the map, and just kind of like bringing it even more into the physical world. I think there's a lot of fun to be had there.
Absolutely. How much do you overlap with the gaming aspect of the hobby? I've talked to several war gamers up here now, and in recent years myself, I used to be very disregarding of war gaming, and talking to the guys in the X community have really made me see the light in many ways.
Totally. Yeah, it's been the same experience for me. I actually, a few months back, had kind of an extended conversation with Hoot Owl about wargaming. And, my boys are big into military history. It's kind of it's a man thing, but it's, they're like really big into the history of, various, periods of war, or various, historical periods, and, the warfare that occurred during it. So, I've never really got into wargaming myself, but again, with this being something that they're very interested in, I'm very interested in bringing it to them. So I've been kind of following a lot of the conversation here. Like I said, Hoot Owl, Mr. Wargaming, 2 really great resources. I did pick up a PDF for a Civil War game, because that's one of my boys' favorite time period. We haven't played it yet. The big problem, and I think I said this the other day talking to somebody, the big problem with us is that, we've always had kind of like a big kid, little kid dynamic. So like when the minis come out, like the little kids just lose it, like they want to play too. And, so there's kind of, kind of difficulty in using like those, kind of physical, aspects of gaming.
Yeah.
But, now that we've got like our little garage space that we're setting up, I think we get an area where, the big kids can actually, keep a war game going without, somebody getting their hands on all the important pieces.
Yeah, that was a big problem for me, even as a kid. It was, you have to finish it in that session because we can't keep the table set up that we have to fold out a temporary table to play in the first place,
Yep, exactly.
And you mentioned the Civil War stuff too, and I wanted to quick shout out that Ultra here has his Wretched Dixie available on Drive-Thru RPG as a resource.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Hunter, put in the chat where it is. I can't remember if it's Drive-Thru or if it's up on the Red Room store. I think it's on the Red Room store now that I think about it. But yeah, he's got Wretched Dixie, and it's explicitly for the Wretched role-playing game, but using Dixie as and other Confederate areas as part of the background of it. So
very cool. Okay, yeah, I've got it pulled up right here. That's going on my list.
All right, good. Yeah, it's his first foray into releasing any resources, so we're here for you, Ultra.
Totally. I did want to jump back real quick to something that Velma said. I saw it pop up on the screen here. Families that play together, stay together. That is so true. We're very close. We got a big family. But we're very close, and it's because we spend a lot of time just goofing off. We play games. We spend a lot of time outside. Just having fun together. I think honestly, it's helped us to sidestep a lot of issues that other people in my age group with similarly aged kids have. We're very close, and a lot of it is just we just play lots of games together.
I really, really feel you. You never underestimate the power of just having fun together. Totally. And that I see that in my own life. All my best memories of my own parents are the fun things we did together, including playing these games.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Still up on Red Room currently. Thank you. So go to, I think it's mortarret.com. I won't dig it up and drop it in the chat right here now, but show Miguel some love and Hunter as well. So I wanted to go back to your roots. You're one of the few people I know that started in fourth edition. What was that like? Were you hearing rumblings from the old timers at that time, going, "Oh, this is nothing like the original game"? Yeah.
No, I wasn't. But I tell you, I do think coming in late and not really having any background, any of that kind of cultural context, has helped me. I think to keep a very open mind. I don't have any preconceived notions because I don't have deep emotional attachments to certain editions or certain styles of play. So I see a lot of things that cause can generate controversy. I don't have that emotional attachment, so I think it's a little bit easier to see things a little bit more impartially, judge things on their merit. And then I think I benefited immensely from that because, like I said, from fourth edition, I realized in a lot of different communities, there's not a lot of overlap between people who play 4E and people who play, OSR style games.
Right.
But I didn't get introduced to that context until years later. So, and that was, I spent a little bit of time on. Remember Google Plus? Do you remember that?
I do remember. I was a fan myself. That was the one social media I liked, and other ones I avoided. So I was quite disappointed when it went away.
Right. Me too. Yeah. So I spent some time on there, and that's where, like I said, I kind of learned, that there was obviously, decades of lore and context and cultural touchstones there. But yeah, it was a couple of years, after really getting into tabletop games, that I realized like, oh, there's a vibrant community of spirited discussion around all these things.
Yeah, and that was kind of the same thing. I stumbled across this by accident. I think like even through John Mollison, I started with his solo AD&D first edition videos on YouTube, and he led me to. I had an X account that I was using just to morbidly lurk out of curiosity, and I said, "Well, let me go find these people and see what they're talking about," and that's kind of led to everything up to this moment. So, I guess thank you, John Mollison.
For many things. Hashtag thank
for
you,
many
John.
things, not the least of which is this. Now, after fourth edition, you said that's when you discovered more the OSR community and the BX itself.
Mhm.
And what was your take at that time? Had you grown fatigued by the sheer number and crunchiness of fourth edition? I've played it very little myself, but it seems very, very tactical. I feel like the criticisms were warranted. It's not like any other edition of D&D, but I thought it was a perfectly good game in its own right.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely, there's lots of D&D DNA in it, but it is, I think, a fundamentally different game, especially if you compare it to something like BX. It was such
Absolutely.
a stark contract for me, such a stark contrast. And yeah, 4E, very mini heavy, which is another reason why I kind of looked towards, some of the older games. Again, BX is, very kind of perfectly aligned, I think, to our style of play, given, our constraints and then just kind of what we're predisposed to. But yeah, I think, it really just what attracted me to it initially was how the page count compared. Like first of all, you've got a whole game kind of bundled into BX, whereas with 4E, the books are larger. There's you to have that kind of that same foundation, you got to have 3 books, and it was just a fundamentally different experience. Right from sitting down and reading the core rules to the style of play, and it just like I said, it kind of just spoke to the way that I've always kind of felt inclined to play, much better.
I've sort of had this thing over the years where each edition I judge by the 3 core books that since that paradigm is set in. Pardon. But and then I analyze, well, what kind of game could you run? If you just use those first 3 books, what kind of game would you end up with? What will come out of that? And I love that conversation that's come out of the bros and other first edition enthusiasts we get to interact with, of hearing exactly how that does play out, what kind of experience that is. And but I think that same idea applies to all of the editions: second, third, fourth, fifth, and now sixth, or whatever you want to call it. Um, each one has a core experience that it provides, and BX has a very specific and biased one, just like AD&D was, because you
Hmm.
have all those encounters. You have the set list of monsters that get rolled up and show up on your map, and most of them, any whichever one you've chosen to work with, you usually have some sort of exploration or random terrain role that you use to
Hmm.
populate the countryside. Now, do you tend to lean towards random tools like that when it comes to like building a local setting, or are you much more deterministic, like like to sit down and plan it out and figure out what makes sense to you?
Yeah, I do like the random tools a lot. That was another thing that I really liked about BX. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of that randomness. I like to lay the setting out. I've kind of talked a little bit before, but I'm a you know big accurate geography enthusiast. I really like to see maps that mirror reality in terms of the way geography is laid out. The kind of geographical features. I think that those probably inform, I think, more than anything, the nature of an experience, the nature of an encounter. So I think randomness really leans into that, and that's kind of what I've been doing with the Island of the Ape Men. Is we create this map. You've got lowland swamps, you've got jungle, covered mountainsides, you've got deep jungle forests, you've got river deltas, and those are going to inform the variety of experience you have there. So the random tables for encounters, whether they be monster encounters, natural geographical features. I think that kind of really leans into that emergent style of play where you just like lay the world out there, you put the sandbox
Yeah.
in place, and then everything else happens randomly. And that's a really fun experience for me as a GM too. It's nice, not knowing what's going to happen. It's
Yeah.
emergent for me, and it's more fun that way for me as well. I don't really subscribe to that kind of like story style of play. I like when the story evolves based off of random encounters and the players' reactions to them. And then of course there's always that kind of milieu, the backdrop of what's actually happening. The world is alive, the world is in motion, but the way players interact with what's happening around them, that's where the real story is. And I think that random, just random emergent play really supports that.
Absolutely. And all of my favorite memories thinking back over the years are situations that no one saw coming. Someone taking advantage of an opportunity, that weird but powerful magic item that the DM forgot you had, that, whatever it happens to be, there's always that moment that no one saw coming. But if you saw it in a movie, you would stand up and cheer in the theater. We all know that moment. We've all
Totally.
had it at our table.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, one of what I think one of our memories from a session that we all talk about probably the most is just I just on a little whiteboard that we had several years back, just kind of threw together a little map to do a little dungeon crawl, because we just wanted to sit down and play something real fast. So put together a little map. It's ice caverns, and I just start randomly rolling what's in the room, what kind of treasures, what kind of features, as each room they enter into, and they go into one room, and there's a crystal fountain in the room. I roll that up off a table. And it's got running water, so of course the water's got to do something, right? So
Right,
they go take a vial of it.
It'd be weird if it didn't.
Exactly, it's not just normal water. So my wife's character, a little hobbit, she takes a sip, and it's like, well, what do we do? So I've got a table here of random magical potion effects. So roll it up, and they get it makes you a kid. So she drinks it. It turns her into a 5-year-old hobbit. So the next thing they think to do is, okay, well, let's hold on to the rest of this. So they bottle up some of it, and it turns out the caverns had been carved by like a giant ice worm. So as they go deeper into the caverns, they actually find and awaken the ice worm. First thing they do, throw a vial into its mouth, and it turns into a little baby ice worm, and then it's a pet. That's and they still talk about it to this day. And that was all just totally random table driven play.
Yep. Yep. I had an entire campaign major arc established in the first session by uh, the inevitable, the perpetual, ubiquitous sorceress casts a sleep spell on the goblins and they all go down. And while the rest of the party starts slaughtering all the sleeping goblins, the sorceress throws herself on one and preserves his life. And then that later on becomes the most significant NPC of my entire life. That little goblin.
Never saw it coming.
Never saw it coming. Never saw it
Yep.
coming. Had no idea that's what the campaign was going to be about. But that's what it ended up being about. Was becoming a goblin king, and that's a whole long story. We'll get at another time. That's why.
Yeah, it's a title that you bear to this day.
To this day. So, what is it that is so special about the experience that we're engaging with here? It seems like you and I are on the same page in the sense that we love that immersive role-playing moment when you're... But what is it exactly about that? What is it that we're trying to capture?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of it has to do, I think immersion is, it happens, right? There are a lot of conditions that, are required for it to occur. But I think, the first one is, and to kind of go back to a lot of what, John talks about in the Living Campaign, is that it has to feel alive. It has to feel like something. It has to feel like a world where, the choices that you make in it matter, where things are going to happen, irrespective of, whether you cause them to happen or not, and where your choices matter. So I mean, that's that kind of sandbox style of play, where nobody knows what's going to happen, but anything could happen, because the world is reacting to your input. It's reacting to your tactics, your strategy, and the way you put your goals into action.
And hence, referring back to McGowan's title, The Living Campaign, that's the essence of it. Is it needs to be a living, breathing world. I don't know if it's overused, but the word I most often associate with it is the verisimilitude, where it doesn't need to be realistic; it needs to feel realistic.
Exactly.
That's more what it is.
I mean, if you're trying to make a realistic game that's full of elves and magic, well, you're playing the wrong genre,
right?
Right. But you're absolutely right. It has to feel consistent. It has to replicate those elements of realism within the context of that fantasy world.
Absolutely. So, in the grand scheme of things, do you find yourself to be a rules light sort of a judge or a rules heavy sort of a judge? Like
that? Yeah, that's another really good question. I would say it depends on the system that we're playing. I do believe that you should play the game, at least as you're learning the game, play by the rules. That way that you're getting the experience that the creator of the game designed it for. And then of course, you can always change rules, add rules, and make it your own experience. But if you're playing a game, I think the best approach is right from the very beginning to follow those rules so that you understand the designer's vision of that game. So when we play Tiny D10, we follow all the rules. But and I say this in the introduction of the game, there are going to be a lot of situations that there aren't any rules for. And a lot of times you don't need rules for certain things. Some people like to do. If you're trying to, convince somebody of something, they'll roll for it, and you can do that. Obviously, every game is designed to support, leveraging your character's attributes to see if you succeed at convincing somebody of something, or you could just try. You could role play that and see if you can come up with, a convincing line to, make somebody believe something. So that I think comes down to a style of play. But that style of play is supported, in either direction by the rules of, every game, including Tiny D10.
Absolutely. And I very much am in agreement. Like, my tastes do change. I mostly go for the rules light experience. But there are times where I do crave that crunch, or I like a particular game enough where, and if you're going to do that, like I've got Axe 2 on my shelf. So, when I play that, that is going to be, rules as written, and there's a lot of them,
Yep, totally. Well, and then there's the added benefit of these, more complex systems that have more rules. Well, that means that you can do more things, like domain style play. You can't build a castle in Tiny D10. I mean, you can do anything. You can build any castle that you want. But you might have to kind of wing it. You might have to kind of lean pretty heavily on your own understanding of what this might look like. And not everybody knows what goes into a castle, how much it's going to cost, what kind of resources you need, how long it's going to take. So I mean, like, that's where something like Axe, that at that domain play level, that's what those rules are for. So yeah, I think obviously it depends, like you said, what style of game you're wanting to play and what your desired outcome is, as to what rule set you use and its level of complexity.
Absolutely. Now, have you done the first edition or second edition AD&D?
I have not, actually. So I have the first edition AD&D books kicking around in a box somewhere. I picked them up at a garage sale like 10 years ago, and they were in really good shape back then. And now it's gone from one box and one house and one state to the next. So they're a little banged up, but they're still there. But I haven't actually ever had a chance to play AD&D.
Wow. Well, it's an experience, I'll tell you what. And again, I'm from the generation that we played that initially as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it was once it got too complicated, that rule got thrown out. That's so we use most of the attack matrices and all the information listed under the character classes. That's basically it. I would approach the experience even with a little trepidation to go into which I've joined one now. This is AD&D first edition, rules as written, and we're using them all. And I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's do this. I do want to see what that experience is like.
For sure.
Out of most editions, and my current favorite one is still Castles and Crusades. I like how it is a rules light core mechanic in the Siege engine, but at the table still feels exactly like early editions. To me, it's like the best possible mix of the Beckme rules and the first edition rules. So that's one that is on my list of favorites at all times. Is that one you've had any experience with?
No, I haven't, but I do follow it. Like you said, very clearly has a popular and dedicated following here, and I understand. Yeah, there's a lot of fidelity to kind of earlier rules, but no, I don't have any experience with that one.
Excellent. Well, then maybe I'll change that for you.
I like it.
Online game. What about about the cover art for Tiny D10? Where did it come from?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. So
I
obviously
recognize that piece, I think.
Yeah, so if you Google dragon, that's like the first thing you're going to find. That's been the cover again for about probably 6 or 7 years. When I kind of put this all together. I never really expected this to really go anywhere, and honestly, for the most part, it hasn't really gone anywhere until I just jumped on Twitter, and I got people kind of they laid eyes on it, and people started playing it. Like, this is the most mileage Tiny D10 has seen for like the entire time I've been doing this. Over 10 years, at probably close to 12 years at this point. So like I said, when I put it together, I was, looking for a dragon and public domain. But it's kind of funny in that, just the way it all kind of came together. So to answer the question, the dragon is, I believe he was an old German illustrator from like the 18th century, maybe. He illustrated the dragon. And then he actually has this really neat bestiary with like a lot of really cool fantasy creatures, including a phoenix. So beautiful illustrations. And the phoenix, I've always been like looking for something to do with it. And I'll find out what to do with it one day. But yeah, so he's got a lot of fantasy creatures. And they're obviously all in the public domain now. But then the knight I added a little bit later, just to kind of, give a little bit more depth, a little bit more kind of, action oriented, sort of depiction to the cover. And for the longest time, I didn't know who drew the knight, but I did some digging around, and I ended up finding that it's a 16th century illustration that's actually depicting Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I approaching victory in single combat. So I thought that was really cool. That I just again did the same thing, public domain knight, and the one that I settled on turned out to be none other than Maximilian I, who was, I guess considered historically by a lot of people, to be like the last true knight. So I thought that was kind of a really cool, sort of synchronicity.
Nice. I like that. And so, what are some ways in which you could expand Tiny D10? Actually, I want to do first principles first. Give us a basic description of how the system is set up and it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of on that topic, I would point to Patty's comment about John Mollison's video. Gosh, I saw somebody say something a really long time ago. I can't remember who said it, but they said something to the effect of like the designer should never like pitch their system. They should never describe it. They're too close to it. They need somebody else to do it. And John did a phenomenal job. I was so impressed with that video that he did. And he really just like so perfectly crystallized these concepts that, I've been trying to capture and put into the game, but I'll take a stab at it anyway. So long story short, it's kind of it all revolves around like a universal resolution mechanic of a D10. So at its kind of core, you try to do something. If there's a risk of failure, you roll a D10 and you add your modifiers for it. And that really is the core of the game. There are a few kind of underpinnings. Exactly. I try to keep it straightforward, but there are a few things that kind of underpin that. You've got core attributes for your character. So those describe, how wise, how smart, how strong, how fast your character is. And then you've got skills, which are kind of specific competencies, kind of like in real life, that you can use to augment your chances of success under certain conditions. And the skills all align to those core attributes, power, aspect, intellect, and reflex. Okay. And that's, like I said, that's really like the core of the game there. That's how I managed to keep it to just 10 pages. There are 2 or 3 pages that are dedicated to, how to create your character, what kind of races and classes you have as options. And then, the rest of the core rule book is, 4 or 5 pages on just kind of, generally playing, how to interact with the world, how to use these attributes, these skills to advance your goals. And then there's maybe 1.5 pages for game masters on how to manage players in the dungeon, how to manage players in wilderness travel, wilderness adventures, and that's really what it boils down to.
Brilliant.
But I highly encourage everybody to go subscribe to John Mollison's channel, Mr. Wargaming, and then watch the video he did on Tiny D10. Because like I said,
Joy of Wargaming on YouTube. Give that guy a follow.
There we go.
He's also got a very pleasing voice. It's
he really
very nice to listen to. He's a gamer geek ASMR. I turn him on to go to sleep at night. So, pardon me. I had a train of thought and then it left me, and now I'm trying to recover it.
Happens to me all the time. While you're trying to recover it, I want to shout out here to Patty. He says he wants to get that art piece done. I'm sure you've seen it. He has immortalized Tiny Dio in the cruise battle against a vampire from a Let's Play that he had several months back.
Yes.
And it's looking amazing. So no rush, Patty. I'm obviously very excited to see it done, and I've been like showing everybody I know, like look what somebody's doing. But like I said, no rush. Very excited to see it done. But yeah, it's coming along amazingly.
Do you do conventions at all? Have you gotten a chance to like get this in front of people, run it with groups of other people?
No, I haven't. But I would really like to do that. I haven't, really looked around to see what's nearby. Traveling with 6 kids is, not something we do often. So like one or two times a year, we try to get out to a cabin out in the Black Hills, just off to the western part of South Dakota in our state here. but yeah, otherwise, not big travelers. But
Yeah, I can imagine.
the idea of a convention is on my radar now, especially if I could, like I said, kind of following along with John McGowan here. If I could, bring a big map of my sandbox world to life, and then just throw as many people as possible into it, just kind of open it up. I think that would be a really fun way to approach convention play. Is just slap the big hex map down on the table, bring my boys in, and like just let everybody go crazy.
That sounds awesome. I love sandboxes. I've never been in a West Marches style campaign myself.
Nor have I, but I've read a lot on it because that's one that's really inspired, my sandbox style.
Absolutely. And yeah, while I don't run that myself, it definitely, hearing about that kind of stuff influenced how I run my games. I very much feel like, when I run a game, I like to have a setting in mind and then let the players explore that as they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to depend entirely on what characters they bring to the table and what goals they set for themselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
LARP in the Black Hills.
I am in. You don't need to give me a reason to go back to the Black Hills.
Yeah. And if you pile gaming on top of it, it's like you might as well promise a sex while you're at it.
Yeah, try to keep me away now.
Yeah, seriously. Have you ever LARPed before?
I haven't, but that's another thing that I think looks really fun. My boys are in fencing right now, so they've been doing fencing for a few years, and that's been a lot of fun. I don't have the time to consistently do it with them, but I show up at the gym every now and then and I put my best foot forward there. But they're in the process of kind of getting into the German longsword. So we have been looking for like a HEMA group around town here.
Nice.
Options are pretty thin, but that's probably as close as we'll get to LARPing is just hitting each other with swords. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I have a little bit of the very nominal experience with the SCA and adopting a persona that's similar. They just don't have a game system or a character sheet per se.
Mm-hmm.
And but you do, like you said, the LARPing part is you're learning all those skills for real and brewing.
Yeah.
Fencing and heavy weapons fighting. It's all good stuff. And I also ran a vampire LARP for years, the old classic World of Darkness system.
Very cool.
And so there's a lot of LARPing dynamics that overlap significantly with the conventions we're kind of hearing from the Braunsteins of it's multiple actors operating under a fog of war, and they're each pursuing their own interests. That's very much the core dynamic of how a LARP works. If once you get a certain number of players, that the referee no longer has time to inject his own plots and stories into things. He's too busy running around adjudicating what's actually happening. Becomes your own personal TV show after a bit.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Because you also, being the ST, people will come out here. I'm so excited! I just made a deal with this guy, and then this guy is behind the scenes, pulls me aside, and goes, I'm going to stab this guy in the back so hard. It's going to be great. And it's beautiful to see. It's
beautiful and brutal all at once.
Yes. As a student of a Screama, I can attest that rattan sticks hurt way more than you would expect them to.
I believe that. Yeah.
And the fact that they are flexible makes them hurt more somehow. They do less damage, but hurt more.
Right.
Now, we've talked a little bit about, do we have any genre expansions in the wings for Tiny D10? Do any of the kids have an interest in sci-fi or something else? Do you think maybe we could land a large IP like Star Wars and we could do a Tiny D10 iteration? Don't laugh. It would sell better than anything Star Wars has been doing.
You're right? Probably right about that. I don't know a single. You're not wrong. I don't know a single Star Wars fan who's happy today, and I feel for them. It's always sad to see cherished IP, just disrespected, especially when it comes to the people who love it and who have built so many memories and so much of their experience in fictional worlds around it. So very, very sad. That said, we're not like huge sci-fi fans in the house. When we do sci-fi, I really like I think probably most of my sci-fi is wrapped up in Dune. I read I read the saga for the first time probably 15, 20 years ago. Right. And, I like it because it's low sci-fi. It's like what fantasy looks like in the future. Love the concept of the Butlerian Jihad. I know that's very popular in our circles here. So, yeah, the majority of my interest in sci-fi lies in that like kind of low tech area. It's not really fair. I kind of have a bias against science fiction because I'm in, the tech industry. And when I come home, like I don't want to look at a computer. I don't want, Wi-Fi. I don't want smart devices in my house. Exactly. Like I just, I come home and like I go back to, something that looks more like medieval Europe than anything else, But that said, as far as genre expansions go, I do. I just obviously, we put out the Syndicate with Wayne Klingman.
Nice.
Gosh, I think we that kind of launched like earlier this year. So that was my first genre expansion for me ever for writing a genre expansion. And I just kind of did it as a proof of concept. I was talking to Wayne, many months back about it. And he was like, boy, that'd be cool. And I was like, well, give it a shot, So we did. And, the framework, the scaffolding, it all just kind of worked exactly how it should from that kind of, universal, system, that universal kind of, core system. And at the time, I didn't know anything about mafia stuff. So I had to go read a bunch of books. I read the Godfather book. I saw the Godfather Part 2. He gave me a recommendation of some really good, kind of older, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre movies. So I had to get caught up on like all these tropes, because that's also how the core system works. Like at its core, it's built around these kind of, universal characteristics or universal tropes of, various, types of heroes, Mm-hmm. So like if you look and, it's over on the website, it's kind of, it's presented in that like system reference document, that SRD sort of format. But it shows, the archetypes that you use in the system to build the different classes, fast, smart, strong. So building that around, the mafia genre, the organized crime genre, like I said, I kind of had to get up to speed on the tropes really fast. So I just crashed through a bunch of movies, read a few books on it, and we slapped together something pretty quickly. So that's a genre expansion that's out there right now. You can find that over on Wayne's website, and then Edgeweaver Books is actually the publisher for that. But also you can go to Tiny D10, and all the rules are there free. Again, everything is under Creative Commons. So, if you want it in just one big, long, web-based format, it's there. But if you want, a really well put together book, it's in PDF, and then it's on print on demand on drive-through, I want to say also. But, Wayne and his team over at Edgeweaver, they put together a very beautiful product. They have some top-notch editors, and they took it from, like I said, just like kind of a, document with varying, headers to, something that looks really nice. So we've got that. And I'm also in the process of writing kind of a location supplement for that based off of the world that Wayne has conceived called Nova City. So it's, 1960s organized crime, Eastern Seaboard sort of, Chicago style, New York City style city, rife with crime, corruption, and various factions all kind of, vying for control of the city and influence and power. So I've been, putting that together for Wayne, who is going to be running a game really soon once I get the supplement to him to do kind of like a fundraiser for some of his medical bills. I know we've all been, plugging that to try to help him out there. He does a lot. He does a lot in the community, connects a lot of, talented people with, Edgeweaver for one, publisher who can, really bring people's stuff to life. So anyway, trying to get that supplement into his hands so he can run a fundraiser game with it. Him and I think Mortar McTrebuchet are going to give it a run. But yeah, so it's got, all the major organized crime factions. So you've got your Italian mafia, Russian Bratva, the Irish mob, and then The Chinese triads. And,
Nice.
they've all got their territories. So they've got, we've got factions, we've got territories. The city government is another faction. And it all just kind of, again, very much inspired by, the faction play, the Braunstein style play that, I've just for the first time, been exposed to here on Twitter. But yeah, so that should be out any day now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Wayne does with it. I think there's a lot of fun, a lot of random tables, a lot of rumors, hooks, and then ideally when I'm finished with that, I want to do kind of like a Nova City Occult Files supplement that just introduces some kind of Lovecraftian elements. So
so some paranormal elements,
exactly
mobsters and stuff.
Exactly, yeah. So there's in the Nova City supplement, there's a 1D100 rumors table, and a handful of the rumors. They're a little weird. They're a little spooky. Like eclectic art collector tried to get a rival crew to recover an artifact from the basement of the local Smithsonian style museum. And the artifact ends up, killing them and mysteriously disappearing, So that's a job for the crew if you want to kind of get into that, like, supernatural, paranormal stuff. But I do want to lean into that a little more because I really like that genre. And now that, I say it, I say this is, the Syndicate is my, first genre supplement for a while now. But I actually did another one that was like an Indiana Jones style one that I just recently revived. I totally forgot about it. And that one's called Danger Rules. It's also over on the website. But I kind of want to mash them up. I kind of want to take the supernatural elements from that Indiana Jones style genre and kind of sneak them into the Syndicate.
Nice. And I wanted to call out this comment from Hunter. The only issue I found with the Syndicate is that it doesn't have character level ups. It doesn't show.
Yeah. So that is by design. So I took the level up system and I kind of reskinned it as the notoriety system. So notoriety is supposed to represent their levels because as you move up in notoriety, the crew actually gains like additional abilities. So it's very similar to leveling up as an individual character. But, the idea here is that, you don't level up as a character, you level up as a crew in terms of, your operational efficacy, in terms of increasing the likelihood of successful outcomes based on your experience. But it also adds kind of a different dynamic to it in that, not only do you get good things, you get additional abilities, you get additional points of a shared pool that you can use to increase your success in jobs. There are also some disadvantages too. You get heat from law enforcement. You're a larger target for rival crews, things like that. Now, that being said, I think you could very easily do both, and maybe in a future supplement, maybe like a 1 or 2 page supplement for the Syndicate, I'll reintroduce individual leveling up, but it is a fundamentally different style of play. Like I said, you're operating as a crew, you're operating as like a mini faction within your own faction, to kind of reflect, obviously each of these criminal organizations have their different, different approach, different operational styles. But, the game is overall kind of modeled after the Italian mafia, and it's very strict, hierarchical sort of operation. So that's you see that reflected in the way that, crews are meant to operate. Like you could do a one-man job. Of course, you could do anything, right. But most of these jobs are going to be for, like a crew, again, kind of following that, organized crime trope, of like that, core group of, guys who know each other well, who have developed really strong ties and work together well, like I'm building a team, like the meme sort of thing,
Well, and I can see that too. It's interesting to tie the advancement to the group as a whole instead of to them as individuals, because I think probably where he's thinking along the lines of, but if I know how to lockpick a little bit, shouldn't I be able to get better at lockpicking over time, even though that's not really, the dynamics of the mob. Like if you do that for them, that's what you do for them. There's no like later on you get better at it or you pick that up later. No, if you're a bruiser for them, you are a bruiser for them.
Exactly. Yeah. And now that being said, like I said, there is that shared that shared point pool. So you get, power points that the whole team can share. So, you can still use those for, individual actions. Like you said, if if somebody really wants to make sure that they pick this lock just right, or they crack this safe immediately, then the crew can all agree to say, the shared point pool, we're going to spend it all to make sure that we get right into this safe, no mess, in and out sort of thing.
That's actually a pretty neat mechanism, because then you can spend it on a group activity. So
Exactly.
like not one person is hogging the points or the reward; it gets shared amongst the group.
Exactly. Yeah. And then your notoriety scales too, So if there is, if you really need a certain ability, or you need access to that, larger shared pool of PowerPoints, you can do jobs to increase your notoriety. And then use that notoriety for a bigger job to, like I said, guarantee you've got some successes at kind of critical junctures. And then you can do things to lower your notoriety too, so that you can kind of go back under the radar. Because again, the main disadvantage here is you're attracting law enforcement attention. So unless you're cultivating relationships with law enforcement, which the game does support, then you're going to be under increased scrutiny. So it makes sense at times to spin that notoriety up and to spin it down. So you can do that.
That practically begs a cops-oriented expansion where there's groups of people playing the law enforcement side.
Totally.
That's
Yep.
totally a Steen waiting to happen.
It totally is. Yeah. So it initially was going to be in the Nova City supplement, but I mean the thing's just ballooned. I was going to do like a 5-page supplement, but I don't know where it's going to sit right now, and it depends obviously on formatting, layout, but it could be like 30 or 40 pages at this point.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to include, and I'm going to allude to, is law enforcement as a faction. Obviously they work for the city government, so right. there's if somebody were to play the city government, which they're one of the 5 factions, so it does support that. It's a resource they have, but yeah, I would ultimately like, for people to be, detectives, like, trying to beat, the crew to the job and really introduce like strong competitive play, because I mean, competitive play is baked in. If you're the Italian mafia, and, another player's the Russian bratva, there's automatically friction. It's built into the territory disputes. It's built into the resources they control. But I would love, to get, law enforcement stood up as a faction, and they're just busting all the factions,
Have you ever read Gangbusters?
I haven't, but I'm going to pull it up right now, based on, I'm assuming, your recommendation.
Yes, I'm assuming so too. I have not read Gangbusters myself, but that's one of the old classics. I don't know if that Mariner's Drop in the chat, if that's had a re-release or somebody else has done a newer version of that, a newer edition. But I remember that one from way back in the 80s, early 80s even, perhaps even earlier than that.
Yeah. Okay, I got it pulled up here, 1982. Yeah, it's TSR, so I'm sure I could learn a lot of important things from this one. I'll definitely have to see if I can get a copy.
Darn it, the company used to innovate. The early 80s were a great time. We had the cartoon coming at us. We had hardcover books, but also box sets. It was a great time.
Totally.
There is a BX version.
Yeah, I saw that. They dropped a BX version in 2019. The first edition, 1982. That's the one I'll look for.
Okay.
Yeah, so ultimately, all that to say, super excited about the Syndicate, Nova City. That's actually what we've been playing the most of, me and the kids, just because like it's so much fun. And there aren't a lot of like mafia movies that I can show them, that would be, age appropriate. So, I've done my best to get him up to speed on the tropes. Some of Wayne's books, he very generously sent me a few copies because, that's his thing. He's a subject matter expert on organized crime. So we read a few of his books, and it's given just that background that we need to really just lean into the tropes. And I think play a really fun, kind of silly, but like definitely fun game.
So I believe, given the nature of things, you probably had to create or expand upon firearms rules, modern weapons rules, to accommodate the mob. Did that present challenges despite having such a fundamentally simple system?
It did, just because, again, I don't have a background in that. Like the overwhelming majority of games that I played, tabletop games are in the fantasy genre. Probably one standout would be Call of Cthulhu. So yeah, figuring out how to handle weapons mechanics. I mean, obviously, generally firearms are going to be deadlier.
Yes.
So kind of the way that I leaned into that is an increased likelihood to hit, and then dealing more damage when hit. I didn't want to get too granular. I think if you want to be realistic, like body part systems is a really good way to approach the lethality. Yeah, exactly, the lethality of the strike. But at the end of the day, I just increased the odds to hit, and I increased the damage when hit.
Okay, good.
So just at the end of the day, just try to make them more lethal. That's the idea. Try to make them more lethal while still keeping it simple and still kind of in line with the ranged combat mechanics.
Have you ever been exposed to Cyberpunk 2020?
I haven't.
Okay, so that's an example of I've played other games that are much more realistic from that ballistic sense, like Twilight 2000 and stuff like that, and they tend towards more crunchy systems.
Right.
But Cyberpunk 2020 for me has always been a standout because it is at its core a simple system, not unlike yours. It's D10 plus stat plus skill, so it moves very fast, but it somehow preserves the deadliness of firearms combat. So, most of the time when you get shot in a combat, you're probably just going to go down. So everybody, first round initiative, what is everybody doing? We're diving for cover.
Running for cover, yep.
We're getting for undercover, and then we're going to worry about who we can shoot.
Totally, yep. Yeah, and that's something I've considered too is, much of the game or much of, the Tiny D10 system, there's because, and I built the whole game around, what my kids like, and they like very tactical play. So instead of, baking, really kind of, tactical complex, mechanic into the system, it's just kind of, modularized with abilities. So you can get as tactical as you want with abilities. There are some abilities that, are very tactical. They're about positioning. They're about certain conditions. They're about triggers, things like that. And then there are some that are, more general, and support, a totally different style of play. That abilities are where, tactics get introduced to the game. And I try to keep it that way too with the Syndicate is, any kind of tactical play, like, exchanging fire, things like that. They're going to be based out of abilities. And again, I've considered, in future supplement, adding a little bit more kind of, on tactical crunch to shootouts. But at the same time, if you look at the movies, it's just like 10 guys standing opposite of each other and just shooting.
Right.
And again, it's very tropish, so.
Then Chubby's got a game where the gangsters are vampires. I assume you've probably heard of this guy called Chubby Funster.
Oh yeah, we're mutuals. He's very prolific. He's
City.
Shadow City. Yeah, honestly, the aesthetics for that game are so great. Like, it's on my long list of games to get and never play, just because I want to look at the pictures. But yeah, he's very prolific, and that's a really cool idea.
So the cable that competitive competition is good in the marketplace. So Tiny D10 Vampire, bleh. We can work on that for Halloween, maybe.
Totally.
How's the boys' progress on the zines? Also, tell me about the mimetic marketing of Tiny D10. One of the things I remember perking me up to the game was the photosh. I mean, photos of people holding it.
Yeah. Gosh, that's like the only idea I have is taking people that I like and putting the putting Tiny D10 in their hands. That's like I said. And I guess now that you say it like that, it is very much kind of like a mimetic marketing tactic. But I'm kind of a one-trick pony there. I find pictures of people that I like or think are cool, and I put Tiny D10 in their hands.
Sometimes one trick is all you need.
Right. Yeah, I've got one. I'm just like waiting to drop it. When Conan's holding that amulet, and I put the D10 in his hand. I'm just waiting to use it. But that's, like I said, that's pretty much all I do there. But yeah, as far as the progress on the zines, they're making a lot of good progress on that. So I sat down with them over the weekend, and we just kind of like went through, the documents that I have for like formatting and layout, and just kind of did like a whiteboard session of some ideas and stuff. So they're really excited to pick that up and run with it. I'm excited to see what they do with it. So for some background there, Jack, I mentioned a few weeks ago that I've been doing zines for a few years now, but I had this like epiphany that I've just been doing it all wrong this whole time. Like I've just been taking the core rule set, excuse me, and like things that are already done, and I've just been kind of like boiling them down and putting them into a zine, and just like I'll drop them off at like the local game shop, or I'll take them to a little free library or something and drop them in there. I staple little d10s to them, but I realized like, well, this is a perfect format to do something different. Something unique to release, like special content under. So I totally, I scrapped all that, went back to the drawing board, and now we kind of want to do maybe like a quarterly zine where we include, new monsters, races, classes, spells. I want to kind of serialize hexes from the Island of the Ape Men, and kind of bring those off the website where they sit currently, and actually into the world, and kind of, just like I said, kind of, serialize some things, but I don't have time for that. But my boys, they barely have time for it. So I'm going to, I'm kind of, porting this off to them. And like I said, they're super excited about that. And
teaching them discipline.
Right. Exactly. And it's fun again, that, they're at this age where we can, kind of join creative forces, and I can see, like, their themes, their creative themes, and it's really neat to watch them like be creative and do fun stuff. Right. So yeah, making good progress there. And then also Patty gave me this idea a while back to like make a like some kind of like an advertisement that could run on streams for Tiny D10. And my oldest is like majorly into like game design, programming, 3D animation. So he and I have been kind of brainstorming some ideas on like what like a 5 or 10 second animated ad might look like. So he's got some really neat ideas that I'm excited to see him bring to life too.
Nice. I like the cut of your jib, sir. This is the kind of stuff I want to hear. Because, again, we all want to help each other succeed in this area, in this community, man. It's such a supportive community. And I feel like the biggest struggle any creator in the circle has is not getting the support of the rest of the community, but somehow breaking outside our community into the wider community to reach voices that normally don't hear us. I mean, imagine between you and I, we have a fair amount of overlap with the audience. I know Patty too.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually one of the first things, when I created an X account. I was like, oh yeah, how do you get this in front of like people who play but aren't like part of the community? Because I was under the impression that would be the only people who were interested. Generally speaking, like people in our sphere, they tend more towards like the complex, crunchy games because that's where their head's at. Right. So I figured like, well, I don't know, but I've been very surprised by the support for a rules light system among people who generally, like I said, they prefer that crunch, they prefer that granularity for good reason. I still haven't got in front of like normies, like people not
right,
in the community.
Like normies being like 5e players.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But all the same, like I said, I didn't expect to find a bunch of friends among designers who I thought, had very fundamentally different design philosophies. And I've been very, very pleasantly surprised by that.
That's brilliant. Gwen is forcing me to play Shadow City as soon as it drops, since I don't play Vampire the Masquerade with her.
Nice. That's a good husband. That's the right thing to do.
You deserve it. You should be playing Vampire with her. Now, that's when you have not delved into the world of darkness over the years and the various iterations. Has that one passed you by?
I have seen it, but no, I've never played it. I would say probably like the closest I've gotten is I played a couple sessions it's been years, but played a couple sessions in Ravenloft. And I love like the vampire, werewolf, haunted Eastern European forest aesthetic. But no, I've never actually played Vampire the Masquerade or World of Darkness, none of that.
Yeah, yeah. As summarized by another channel elsewhere, it's the one of the best games ever made with one of the worst fan bases you could possibly imagine.
Brutal.
We'll get about it. I play everything. AD&D 1E is the best system. We can all acknowledge that and play other things on occasion,
Totally.
especially cool stuff friends make. So, still big disagree. I don't think AD&D 1E is the pinnacle. I don't.
That's fair, but I
I
do
can
agree.
understand why you think that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been following the arguments. They're very strong. But like I said, I can't weigh in because I've never actually played AD&D. But I do agree that there should be a lingua franca. You know, like a game baseline, system baseline that we all speak, we all play, and then yeah, you know, we play other things when the mood strikes us, and especially doubly so for our friends. You know, I'll play things, I'll read things that I normally wouldn't otherwise, because you know we have very talented friends here, and you know, got to support them.
The Bro XT or cracking the whip on him. But absolutely, we really need that lingua franca, and I think that, well, that's exactly what we have. It's not one single thing, but that kind of core six attributes, D20 plus base system, D20 to hit, and maybe for saves and skill checks, and everything else is rolling damage or whatnot.
Right.
That paradigm, that generic system, has become the lingua franca of the
Oh
hobby.
yeah. Totally.
You
Totally. Yeah.
know,
The words have to mean the same thing across every system. Otherwise, we can't even talk about them.
ooh, that's very true, and which is why, like, one of my generally, I'm not a fan of when like people rename the six attributes. It's like, no, doesn't need to be changed to might. Just leave it strength. You're not adding anything other than a thesaurus.
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah. And that was one of like my first, you know, inflection points, I guess, for, you know, like design decisions is, yeah, what do I call the attributes, the statistics? You know, and I did settle on using different words because I kind of boiled down those six core into four. And, you know,
Right.
You do kind of have to, for instance, you know, aspect is kind of, it's kind of a combination of wisdom and constitution, you know. So you necessarily have to call it something different that hopefully encompasses this idea of, you know, mental, spiritual, and physical fortitude, because they're you know, deeply intertwined. You
Absolutely.
know, mental fortitude and physical fortitude, you know, they're different competencies, but they're, you know, they come from the same place. So that was kind of my rationale there.
I can understand that, and it's interesting though to see when you take something like that, like combining those two in the aspect. It's like, your mental vibrancy in addition to your physical vibrancy, and it makes you wonder if there are other sort of interesting synergies that could be explored in others.
I think so. Yeah.
Now, what if someone doesn't like that and they say, well, now I really want to have strength and wisdom? How conducive and easy to adapt is Tiny D10 to someone? Okay, I like this system. I like the way it works. But I want to go back to the six basic
Mhm.
stats, right? How hard would that be, and what would need to happen?
I think that would be super easy, and probably the way I would approach it is, yeah, you know, go back to those six core stats, and then if you look at, you know, during the character creation process, you know, you could take the attribute points that you get to assign to the attributes and increase it by, you know, what that be, a third. So increase it by a third. You know, so instead of having three to assign during character creation, you have four, and then you've got all six of those core stats, and yeah, that's pretty much that. You know,
Really?
again,
Okay.
it all functions identically, and you might just have to adjust the math just a little bit, you know, proportionally. But I think it would, you know, scale just fine.
Right, right. And I imagine it, to the extent that aspect of specific abilities, like skills or something,
Hmm.
they can be, divided
Parsed out.
between the
Yep.
two. Yeah, just
Exactly.
right on down the middle.
Yep. And I think it's probably pretty apparent, you know, which ones are more related to mental fortitude and which ones are more related to physical fortitude. So
Now, I am thinking of three genres that I'm going to throw at you. And I want you to tell me off the top of the head how we will use Tiny D10 to simulate these.
awesome. Let's go.
First one, softball. Softball question. Mecha. Mecha combat. Bashing human piloted robots and bashing. How do we make Tiny D10 do that?
That's a really good question. So I would actually look to the mounted combat supplement. It's called Mounts or Mammoths and Mounts, and that's essentially what a mech is, right? It's just it's it's essentially mounted combat. So I would
vehicle, if you will.
Right, exactly. Which you're sitting in it, you're mounted in your vehicle, but it's the same concept. Like you get into something or you get onto something, and it augments your combat abilities. So I mean, yeah, it's basically already written. Instead of being a mammoth rider, you're a mech pilot, but the rules are already there in that supplement.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, the second one, a little bit tougher, but I think you probably got this covered. Kaiju.
Ooh, yeah. Honestly, that one would be challenging because, and I've thought about this before because I've seen some actual, some after action reports, some actual plays that involve kaiju. And it's like, man, the amount of damage these things deal, and the amount of hit points they would have, and the scale that, damage operates at in Tiny D10, like, by default, a successful attack inflicts 1 damage. We're dealing with much smaller numbers, so damage is generally inflicted by default on a much smaller scale. So you'd really have to kind of, I'd hate to tinker too much with that, but I mean kaiju would essentially be like fighting impossible toughness monsters. Monsters that are just they're hard as steel. They're absolutely massive. They have extremely deadly attacks. So yeah, I mean, kaiju would pretty much just always be impossible toughness monsters, right. And you'd really have to leverage,
which reinforces the genre. It's very rare that the popcorn, the tanks and the jets, manage to take a kaiju down.
Right, exactly. You got to be clever. You got to, you're not going to meet a kaiju with force, So yeah, you got to use your resources, magic weapons, magic items, setting traps. You got to be clever.
I even imagine too, you could sit down and introduce a scaling notion like times 100 or times 1,000. Use the standard Tiny D10 system for rolling up your kaijus. Like I got a Godzilla over here and I got a Gamera over here. You're not allowed to mix those two. No, never mind. But we're going to have those two battle it out, and they use a normal Tiny D10 sheet. But when he turns around and inflicts damage to on a human down there, that's times 1,000.
Right, right.
Similar, like the mega damage concept.
Yeah, I love that
in games. So there's an idea off the top of the head. All right.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, and again, you could probably put together a kaiju supplement just a single page. That's kind of the other idea here is because everything is modular. You can introduce new rules very easily. So yeah, I mean, you've got your damage multiplier. That's like the core mechanic that you build a kaiju supplement around. It's viable.
That's awesome. As we gather more modular additions, we can add a spot on the webpage for design your Tiny D10 campaign. And you can toggle, okay, I want it to be fantasy, but I'm also going to include radioactive kaiju. And then, and when
click the generate button
for firearms, we want the hex crawling features definitely.
Right.
Dungeons, science fiction themed dungeons too. Okay, generate rule set, and then it'll print out a little book for you.
Yep, love that idea
for your game.
And I've thought about something similar to that. There was a point where I spent a lot of time and I spun up a self-hosted wiki, and I was trying to break every single mechanic, every single modular thing out into into the individual components, to kind of get a, just a better understanding of how they, interact together at a mechanical level, but also, to see, what you could take away, what you could add in to just fundamentally change the game.
You're getting a stream invite from Hunter.
Oh, I can't turn Hunter down. These things, I tell you, I don't do this. I don't, my presence on the internet is very small, so I do get nervous about these things. But yeah, I would love to do that. That'd be a lot of fun.
You're doing just fine.
Thanks, Jack. I'm doing it for you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's it's kind of like having an exclusive, So now you get to be amongst the legends that I have had on as guests. It's official legend status. I mean, you're in the top 10, the first 10 guests.
I love it. Yeah, and I just got grandfathered in too, so that's great. Because yeah, I mean, like I said, you've had some, very serious people on, who are doing like really incredible things and producing
Yeah, yeah.
amazing products.
And well, and that was the thing. It all kind of started on a whim. I had been kind of planning to do a stream all this year, and then I kept saying stuff like, wait until work calms down or this is over with this. Once I get past this, and then I'll do it. And then before I knew it, half the year was gone. So I said, all right, I'm just pulling the trigger and doing it. And the first pleasant surprise was how easy it's been to line up guests. People so are willing to work with me, want to talk. And it's, again, I'm mostly going throughout our community here and just finding everybody who's got something interesting to say. And I've got even more exciting stuff lined up that I haven't even teased yet.
That's awesome.
I'm so looking forward to this stuff.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing it because, like I said, I really did go back and watch every episode of John with Jack just to be like, what am I in for? But that put my mind at ease. You're very natural interviewer, so I think you got a talent for it, and that's probably in part why it's so easy to line people up for you.
Thank you. I really do appreciate hearing that. My first episode I had on was OSR Dwarf, and that was because I had him on when we were doing Gobstein stuff and had him a couple streams, and I knew, okay, once he and I get going, I know I'm safe. We're good for a couple of hours, right? So that's going to be a safe first guest, but everybody else has been a great experience. And specifically, I really wanted to get a chance to talk to people, not just the people, that are prolific creators like Chubby Funster and the other people who have things that they're working on and things they want to do. But I love just talking to the people who love this hobby like we do.
You summon the Pun King. He's here.
Oh, that's it. I'm getting naked. Okay. Next time.
It's funny you should do that. I was walking around before this interview with my shirt off, and my kids were like, "Are you doing the interview without your shirt?" Like, no. Don't worry. I'm going to put a shirt on.
Yet.
It's just so hot here.
Oh, yeah. We're going to get natural. And I was calling for you earlier, Pun King. What was it you said to us? What would you dropped a good pun earlier? I'm gonna have to go back and.
Oh yeah. I said that me and the game group, we've been monkeying around on the island of the ape.
Oh, do you see what he did to us, Pun King? Right under our very noses, he did it.
Right off the top of my head.
Pun Force X. Right. Now, as I was saying, genre 3. Specifically, Shaw Brothers Kung Fu movies.
Oh, man. Okay, I'm sure I've seen them because I've seen a lot of old Kung Fu movies.
Okay,
List some titles for me.
Master Killer or the 36th Chamber of Shaolin?
Okay, I've seen 36 Chamber.
5 Deadly Venoms?
Yeah. I know of it, but I haven't seen that one.
Good. No, I saved
I'm going to have to start writing these
because I
down.
thought it might be the hardest if you're not familiar with the source material.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I would say probably so I've actually thought about this before. I was working for a little while on a genre supplement for like a no fantasy, low magic setting called Valor, where, like you just play a knight. And instead of different classes, you have kind of like, like martial traits, so you have like different like weapon specialties, just kind of, differentiation for combat styles, basically. Because in a lot of ways, if you strip away the archetype, if you strip away the role play aspect of it, classes are defined by their combat. Yeah. And that's kind of how I approach design of classes in Tiny D10 as well. They all serve very specific kind of combat functions. And then those functions are aligned to archetypes that are aligned to tropes. And, you just kind of, generally get a very broad familiarity with whatever genre you're working in. So anyway, I abandoned that one. Just never got around. There's a lot to do, a lot to change. But I think the principle is, you get rid of classes, you're looking at hand-to-hand combat with various flavors of martial styles, So instead of classes, I would have different ability sets that align to the different styles of kung fu, and those abilities would underline again at that tactical level of play because that's how
Right.
the abilities
Yes.
work. That's how the different kung fu styles would be expressed.
Brilliant. I love what I'm hearing because that's specifically one of the things that would make that film genre come alive is each style or each fighter plays out differently on the table. Having dabbled in some other, martial arts rule sets, that's an important feature that's really got to go through. Whereas, like, say, the old second edition approach to martial arts, it was kind of generic movie foo, not a specific style of
Mhm.
any type. So I definitely love the idea that the way you train and the way you build your character would give you very specific capabilities.
Totally. Now I want to do that. It's been a while since I sat down and watched an old
Oh
kung
yeah,
fu movie.
I love them.
Um,
Always been a
I'm,
favorite.
I'm 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 on baby leave right now, so other than building stuff, I got a chicken run that's sitting out in the driveway
Right.
right now. I got to take it out to the backyard when we're done here and frame it up. But so other than building things, I've got nothing going on. I might just grab some, give me your
Okay.
top 5. We don't have to do it now, but
Oh
shoot me
no,
your
we're
top
doing
5 and
this
I'll
shit
sit down and
now.
we'll watch it with the boys.
Shaw Brothers. Okay,
Let's go.
So, top one.
I'm writing them down as you read them. I'm writing them down.
I'm going to type them in the chat too.
Perfect.
36 Chamber of Shaolin. That's a Gordon Liu classic.
Naturally.
Oh, and they're asking about Baby Leave. This is number 6 that arrived, right?
It
God
is. Yeah, number 6 for us.
Hers.
He's Thank you. Honestly, jumping from 5 to 6 kids is it's the biggest difference of ever. Well, maybe at least in my experience, going from 1 to 2 kids, that's a big difference than going from 2 to 3. What's another kid? And it's kind of that attitude up to 6, and it's like, wow, I've got big kids, I've got little kids, and then I've got an infant, and it's like that is a big jump. And we're all over the place. We're having a great time. He's so good. He just eats and sleeps.
Yeah.
But I got to keep the big kids happy. Got to keep the little kids happy. Got to keep the 4-year-old from messing up the 11-year-old's Lego creations.
Right. Yeah. I guess the thing that works to your advantage is now the older kids are old enough that when the baby gets to a certain size, you go, okay, oldest, take this and go fishing or something. Right.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Oh yeah, they're huge helps. And Punking, you're so right. Yeah. Yeah. Now with 6 kids, 5 of whom can talk, it's like, who did this? Well, not me.
Yeah.
Times 5. It's like I'll never know who did anything.
Flashing back to all the Family Circus cartoons I saw in the paper as a kid.
Right. Yeah. Who was monkeying around in the toilet tank and messed up the flapper there? Who did that? Oh, not me.
Okay. So again, top of the list, 36 Chamber of Shaolin. Second on the list is 5 Deadly Venoms. Classic. Okay. Another classic is called Heroes of the East. And that one is...
Haven't even heard of that.
That is another Gordon Liu. It's the same guy who plays in 36 Chamber. But it's a beautiful movie with a good story. And also, it's one of the few kung fu movies where I don't think anybody dies in it.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, but it does not ruin the movie at all.
All the suspense is taken out.
Now, this one is a bit tougher. Invincible Shaolin. Oops, I misspelled that. But Invincible Shaolin is another Shaw Brothers classic. Don't watch that one with the kids. It's a bit bloody and brutal.
Okay.
Don't keep the kids around on that one. No nudity or anything like that, but it can be seriously. And I would say the last quintessential one is called Crippled Avengers. Totally not a PC title, and it shows, but it's in that one. The group portrays a group of disabled to varying degrees martial arts experts. One's deaf, one is blind, one is kind of crazy and autistic. Another has no legs and has prosthetic ones instead. So it's great movies all across the board. Shaw Brothers amongst kung fu movies, has hands down, in my opinion, the best production values, but also is the old classic traditional style, and the fight choreography is just beautiful. So like
Awesome.
Shanghai
Okay.
Nights, no shade, Jackie Chan, one of the best,
Oh,
great
yep.
movie and
I
stuff
love
like
that
that.
one.
I like the Shaw Brothers better.
Shanghai Noon too.
Shanghai Noon too, also great.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, you know what? Yeah, we'll sit down and we'll watch these over the next week, except for Invincible
Yeah.
Shaolin, maybe. I'll preview that because, the big kids, they're boys.
And
They're
since
not
I
really
mentioned
phased
it,
by
don't
violence.
watch
Like,
Five Deadly Venoms with the kids either. There's actually some graphic
okay.
torture scenes in that. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, so
brutal.
brutal.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Heroes of the East is safe for the kids. 36 Chamber of Shaolin is safe for the kids. There's nothing super graphic or bloody in that one. And what was the fifth one I mentioned? Wasn't I five? Oh, Crippled Avengers.
Was it
Yeah,
Crippled
Crippled
Avengers?
Avengers
Okay.
should be good for the kids. I even think it's a handy,
Awesome.
capable movie.
Awesome.
You know, very
Very
inclusive.
inclusive.
Very inclusive. That is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we'll sit down and watch those, and maybe we'll get a one pager out
That'll
of
be
it.
brilliant. I'd love to see it. One of the important things is to express the various techniques and like power ups and stuff like that. Like next week's
Mm-hmm.
guest, Mr. Joel Clark, he is the author of Lone Wolf Fists, and he's wrote an extremely intricate and awesome system for not just portraying the martial arts stuff themselves, but also portraying this kind of style where you have to build up to your big bad
Mm-hmm.
maneuvers. It's not like well, wait a minute,
Very
if you
cool.
can scream and blow a mountain apart, why didn't you just do that in the beginning? Like, why did you fight for 2 days
Right.
and
Right.
then blow the mountain apart? you know, there's answers to these questions. Stupid answers sometimes, but they're yeah,
Hey, as long as they're there, that's all that matters. Yeah, that's I missed that Kickstarter by like a day, and I still regret it every time. I see something from him pop up, so I'm gonna have to get my hands on that.
Yeah, I'm still waiting. I backed the second Kickstarter, the Acid and Steel that he's working on, which I think is in the final
Okay.
stages. And I also missed the initial Kickstarter for Lone Wolf Fest and just bought it print on demand afterwards.
I'm looking at these. I have no knack for puns. They're incredible. It's an art.
Sammo Hung did a TV show called Martial Law.
I know Sammo Hung. I want to say I've seen him in gosh, it's been a while since I watched some he's the heavier set guy.
Fatso.
Very talented martial artist. Yeah.
He's super he goes all the way back to the Bruce Lee days and stuff like that. But yeah. He had a
Yeah, I've seen him in a few Donnie Yen movies. I really like
Donnie Yen is fantastic. I even have a copy of his very first movie, Drunken Tai Chi, which came out in like 1980 or something like that. But yeah, Donnie Yen is a fantastic martial artist and just amazing.
For sure.
And it was great because I was a huge fan of his long before the Ip Man movies happened. And that was interesting. He said it himself. It was like, oh man, I'm in my 50s and I finally hit this world famous role that's made me a superstar around the role. And I'm like, I'm in my 50s. I've been doing this for 30 years already. It's an amazing thing.
We got Patty back. He's taking a break from being an electrician.
With the homeowner. Well, don't let him give you no guff.
You tell him how you're going to wire that house.
You are going to fix this thing, and again, I'm not signing off on this. Look, think of it. You're a petty bureaucrat now, Patty. Abuse the power. Give in to the dark side. Bury him in red tape, Patty. Red tape.
Red tape is actually, just since we bring it up, red tape is actually a faction ability for the city government. They can use bureaucratic processes to slow things down. So it's called red tape.
Brilliant. That's
they'll shut your casino down if you don't play nicely with them. Red tape.
So 13th here. I'm not familiar with Chasing the Dragon, although it sounds familiar.
Yeah, I just pulled that one up.
But I will be sure to check that out.
It's probably not Life of an Opiate Addict. You're probably not talking about that one.
Yeah, that's what I normally associate with that term.
Right.
That's why, like, you look up certain terms and,
Yeah, I got a white paper here. Chasing the Dragon, the smoking of heroin and cocaine. Again, probably not that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm a Taekwondo guy from years back, and the organization used to be named the World Taekwondo Federation and abbreviated all throughout the 80s and 90s as the WTF. And then the internet made them change their name. It ruined that one. Thanks, internet.
Yeah, it looks like 1996 television film. No, that's not it. We'll find it.
This is not getting better. It's getting worse.
It is getting worse, yeah. But a single mom who's addicted to drugs, that's, again, probably not what we're looking at.
I'm starting to wander into websites where the parental blocks are kicking in. This is not good. I'm backing out now. Brilliant. So, what's got you excited for the future? We've talked a bit, but what are your upcoming projects? What do you got coming for us?
Yeah, so let's see. The zine I'm very excited about. That's going to be like a physical thing, so I don't really think there's like an elegant way to distribute it in PDF format. So I'll probably still make, all that stuff available, some way or another. But, I'll definitely use zines will become part of giveaways. And that's kind of another thing I'm really excited about. I bought, there we go. I bought 50 of those. You were one of the early winners too. Yep. So I'll keep doing the giveaways because, like I said, that's a lot of fun for me. I've got stickers now. I don't have any in arm's reach here, but so they come with stickers. One of our mutuals is getting into the tea business. So I've been sending like one of my favorite herbal teas. With all the copies, and so I'm going to probably, I'm going to try to link up with him, start getting, some of his, fantasy themed tea to start shipping off with, giveaways. I also bought 50. I also bought, like I said, 50 books.
Nice.
So, if people want to buy them directly from me, I'm still selling them at print cost. So it's $10 flat, including shipping. And that actually saves you like a few cents over going through Lulu. And then, of course, if you buy them directly from me, you get the sticker, you get the tea. I've got, tons of books. I'm actually, connected to a like an antique book dealer here in town. He's just got phenomenal books, but he's just throwing stuff away. Lots of like paperback American poetry. So I like to put, some of my favorite American poets, some of my favorite stuff, slip that into there. But yeah, so if you buy directly from me, like I said, you save a few cents over Lulu. It gets there way faster. You get a sticker and, whatever other fun stuff I can slip in there. But yeah, the zines, really excited, to get those out. Like I said, eventually those will become part of the giveaways. We're going to serialize, Island of the Eight Men stuff in there. We'll put new classes, and eventually maybe even put, totally new supplements in there. Sky's the limit for that. We've got the system down in terms of, how we're formatting, how we're doing layout, how we're printing. So yeah, it's really just a matter of, pulling all those threads together. Really excited about Nova City.
Yeah.
Really excited to get that supplement out. Like I said, that'll end up being pretty big, I think. Probably, 30, 40 pages once it's, put down into a 6x9 format. That's another thing I'm going to try to do. Somebody who played the game with their kids recently, they printed out all the individual books, because Fantasy Core is composed of 3 different books. You got the core rules, the Fantasy Monster Bestiary, and then the Broken Light Adventure. So it's kind of, complete system that way. But they printed out each book individually in booklet style. So it's kind of, like a 3 little, pamphlet style, 6x9, more or less. I guess it would be, similar dimensions there. but yeah, so you just fold it in half. So that was really cool. And I've actually had a few people ask me about doing a 6x9, and I think that the way the text and the layout would scale, it should really just be like a matter of throwing it into that 6x9 template. So I want to break those books out individually. So you do like a little collector set. People really like having access to the different books physically. I think that works in play pretty well.
Yeah,
for
I can really see that.
Some people the way they approach. Yeah, I think so too. So yeah, I've got that. And then, like I said, the Nova City supplement, excited to get that in Wayne's hands, excited to see what he does with it for the fundraiser game. That'll eventually come into print. And then, like I said, we're playing a lot of the Syndicate at home right now. So I'll probably just, keep on that thread. I'll take my Danger Rules, Indiana Jones style supplement, and we'll put that into the Syndicate with the Occult Files, and add some supernatural, paranormal play to the Syndicate, and then whatever other ideas people give me. A lot of people just like you mentioned, how do we adapt the system to Kung Fu? We hash it out in real time, and we turn it into a one-page supplement. So whatever cool ideas people give me, I'm going to run them all.
Brilliant. So I just pasted the link to the site, td10.org/home. And we're right in the chat so people can find you. Where else are you active? Where can people find you if they want to hear more and want to pester you with questions?
I'm on X, and then I've got the website, and I'm not anywhere else. My email too is on. See you, Hunter. My email is on the website too. So if you ever want to just shoot me an email, if you're not on X, or if you want to, long form, there are a few people I go back and forth with just in email, just, to, have a little deeper conversations. That's a great idea.
I remember having those from like my Marvel superhero sets back in the 80s, folded over. Amazing.
That would be a good thing to work with Patty on. Maybe we can I can contract him to drop some stands. That'd be really cool, and just make those printable. Because the gal actually who printed out the booklets individually to play with her kids, she also had some little homemade paper standees, and that was really cool to see. So yeah, that's why part of the reason I'm here. You guys are full of great ideas, and it gives me a lot of inspiration.
We're crowdsourcing it all, man.
Exactly. You do the hard part. Come up with the ideas. I'll put them in action.
If the story of Dave and Gary tells us anything, it's that being the idea guy is not enough. Millions of dollars come from doing all the other stuff.
Exactly. A lot of ideas out there. Very few people putting them to paper.
All right. Before we wrap up, then, I feel like we're coming to a natural conclusion here. Is there anything that you were hoping to talk about tonight that you didn't get a chance to bring up?
No. Yeah, we covered everything. Like I said, you're a phenomenal interviewer. I felt totally at peace this entire time.
That is exactly what I want to hear, whether it's true or not. So
it's 100% true.
Keep telling, lather it on, butter me up.
While we're at it, your beard, dude, it's amazing. Since the last time I saw you, I feel like it's grown 6 inches, but it's just so silky smooth.
Thanks.
You see mine. The longer it goes, the longer I let it grow, it grows out, not down. So it's just I have to keep it at a certain length.
Minimal, very minimal grooming into it. I brushed it right before the stream. I do that from time to time.
Yep.
An epic collab. I'm thinking he's talking about you and Patty.
I think so. Yeah. And I think so too. Yeah. He's, we've already done so much together. He did the Let's Play with that adventure. They used Cyrus's Let It Roll to just roll everything up. It was so cool to watch. Really enjoyed that. And then, of course, he's working on that piece right now depicting Tiny Dio and his crew's epic battle against the Vampire Lord. And that's looking amazing.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I would love more opportunities. In fact, I would seek out more opportunities to work with
Mr. Dale says, I'm totally going to have to rewind and watch the whole thing. Yes, you do. As a matter of fact, you should be ashamed of yourself for missing it the first time. And I'll at least make Tiny Dio's crew available. Holy gamer!
Let's go. The Pun King does not want you to take your shirt off again, apparently.
How much will you pay me to keep my clothes on? I need to monetize this shit. Good, and he is ashamed. All right. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this night's episode of Jawin with Jack, where my special guest has been Aaron of Tiny D10. We had a rambunctious conversation that went all over the place. Aaron, thank you for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, Jack, and thanks to everybody in the chat. Appreciate all you guys.
Good night, everybody.
All right, take care, everybody.